Okay, so you have the wonderful opportunity of seeing me twice, and I'm a lot to see, as you can see. As mentioned, I am Ron Parker. I have the honor of being the president and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council, an organization that is comprised of over 700 of the most senior level Black executives in global enterprises around the world. We're proud to have Valerie Rainford as one of our members, and we are proud to have those of you who are representing your respective organizations in the room with us today. We have the wonderful pleasure of having people like Ken Chenault, the outgoing CEO and chairman of American Express, and Ursula Burns, former chairman and CEO of Xerox, and others being a part of our organization. And we do everything from the C-suite all the way down to the pipeline by working with strategic partners like Inroads and Lead and A Better Chance. So with that said, I have the wonderful pleasure of moderating the second panel, which really is a combination of two worlds coming together. One is called the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, an initiative that started last year, that was launched in June of 2017 at the announcement of 150 plus CEOs who had signed on a commitment to drive diversity and inclusion within their respective organizations. But also to talk about the CEO Action and how it will hopefully collaborate with the new alliance in driving our common interests around improving diversity and inclusion. So I have the wonderful pleasure of having a panel. Some of the members I know quite well, whom I've worked very closely with. So as I introduce them, I will give a little bit of their bio so you get a sense of their accomplishments and what makes them experts in these particular areas. So I would ask, first of all, David Chun. David is the founder and CEO of Equilar. Since starting Equilar, David has become one of the most respected and trusted names in corporate governance. He has constantly been recognized by the National Association of Corporate Directors as one of their top 100 most influential players in corporate governance, and is often is asked to speak at various events. Prior to the founding of Equilar, David was a vice president in investment banking. In addition, David was a management consultant with Bain & Company. He also serves on the advisory board of the Wharton Center for Entrepreneurship, and is a director of the Asian Pacific Fund Community Foundation. He is also a member of the Young Presidents Organization, I think fondly referred to as YPO. He is also a graduate of the Business School of Wharton, where other famous individuals have also attended. I'm not going to mention any names, okay? At the University of Pennsylvania, and has a Bachelor of Science with honors in Systems Engineering from the University of Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, David Chung. Also joining us on this panel is Deborah DeHaas. We like to refer to as Deb DeHaas. She is Vice Chairman and Chief Inclusion Officer and National Managing Partner for the Center for Governance, Corporate Governance for Deloitte LLP. Deb is responsible for developing and implementing Deloitte's diverse workforce strategies and leads the Center of Board Effectiveness. She also sets the strategies for establishing board and C-suite relationships through innovative programming. Deb previously served as a member of the board of directors for Deloitte LLP and the U.S. firm's representative for Deloitte's Canada Board of Directors. Prior to her current role, Deb was also the Central Region Manager, Partner, and was named the Accounting Today's Top 100 Most Influential list in 2013 and 14. She is a graduate of Duke University with a BS in Management Science and Accounting, and she is a certified public accountant and is a member of several state and national societies. I must say Deborah and Deloitte are also partners with the Alliance for Board Diversity for working with us in creating our biannual board census that we do, where we look at women and minorities on Fortune 500 boards, and has been a very good partner with us, along with other members of that alliance, Catalyst, LEAP, HASER, and the ELC, supported by a diversified search in our missing pieces report. So we are very, very glad to have Deb with us this morning as well. Returning to the stage as myself is Sid Wilson, who is President and CEO of the Hispanic Association of Corporate Responsibility. In that role, Sid is responsible for directing programs and initiatives aimed at encouraging Fortune 500 companies to include more Hispanics in the areas of employment, procurement, philanthropy, as well as board governance. Prior to becoming president and CEO of AABR, Sid amassed over 20 years on Wall Street in the area of financial research. And I must say I was impressed when I first met him because I thought as another tall, good-looking man equal to myself, but he spoke with a unique accent. In 2009, Sid was appointed to the President Obama's as an appointee to the National Museum of the American Latinos Studies Commission, looking to possibly place another Smithsonian Museum on the National Mall. Sid also serves on the board of the Latino Justice League and the National Council of La Raza, as well as Dominicans on Wall Street. He is a former vice chair of the Board of Trustees for Bergen Community College and is a former advisory board of my old organization called PepsiCo. Sid is a proud graduate of The Ohio State University with a degree in economics. Sid Wilson. And last but not least, a good friend that I've come to know over the last couple of years serving in my role is Steve Howe Jr., who is U.S. Chairman of the Americas and Managing Partner of EY, supporting more than 70,000 people in 30 countries. He also leads the U.S. And the Americas Executive Committee and represents EY in regulatory relationships. He is also the executive sponsor, which I'm very proud to see, and I heard when I met him about 2 years ago, EY's global focus on diversity and inclusion. He has been with EY for over 35 years. He doesn't look the part, but he has been there for 35 years, serving in a number of roles, including managing partner of financial services. He also serves as an audit partner for various global financial institutions and senior advisor for many of EY's largest clients. He serves on the board of governors for the Center for Audit Quality, the board, the partnership of the New York City's, for New York City's Board of Trustees, as well as serving on the board of Carnegie Hall, as well as the board of directors for Peterson's Institute for International Economics. He previously served as Board of Trustees for the Financial Accounting Foundation and the Board of Trustees for Colgate University. He has been honored by the National Association of Corporate Directors as the top 100 directors, which is a very prestigious honor, given the number of board seats that are out there. And Accounting Today also named him one of the top most influential leaders. He leads EY's diversity efforts to be and was recognized by Diversity Inc. as one of the top organizations here recently. And he is the recipient, which I know he is extremely proud of, for those of you who will know the legacy of this gentleman down in Philadelphia, but he is the recipient of the prestigious A. Leon Higginbottom Corporate Leadership Award, which he received a couple of years ago, which we talked about. He's a graduate of Colgate University with a BA in Mathematical Economics and an MBA in Accounting and Finance from the Stern School at New York University. So, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Howes, okay? So, this particular session is going to be talking about how the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion could very well benefit from this new alliance and how these two organizations can work together. Just as I take my seat, just show of hands of how many of you are aware of the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. Okay, very good. So we're making progress, Steve. Good, good, very good. And let me say this. I am proud of the fact that Steve with EY and Deb with Deloitte, as well as Sid Wilson and Catalyst, as well as LEAP, were one of the first organizations to sign on to the CEO Action Pledge, along with 11, I think we have 9 other partners who work with us as a part of the steering committee. So this is going to be a twofer. We're going to talk about the CEO action for diversity, but then we're going to morph into the New Majority Alliance. And I'm going to start with Deb and with Steve. Steve and Deb, could you guys give us a sense of why was it important for the private sector, and especially your respective organizations, to be a part of this steering committee and to sign on to this commitment of three things? And that's one, to make sure we have these conversations about what was happening in the public domain within our organizations, to make sure that we were creating a safe workplace for our employees. Two, to share best practices, but also to build our skill set as leaders by understanding and learning more about unconscious bias. So, Steve, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go to Deb, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron. It is great to be here. What a great event. Sorry I can't stay for the whole 2 days, but I'm also a little challenged this first time with the returning panelists, both tall, good-looking guys. I'm going to do my best up here. But
you look great, too.
But, you know, I would say this. We at EY, when I thought back to this question and this, you know, the CEO challenge, I think we've been committed to diversity and inclusion for a long time at EY, but, you know, it's a journey. You never get there. You know, this is something you need to stay committed to. But I think the last few years in particular, I think, raised the challenge further. I think with racial issues like you've talked about and referenced, gender issues, a divisive election, I found that our people were calling out for more than ever, and more in that, you know, while we were making great progress, we need to do better. And also, I think we need to realize that businesses have a responsibility, not just to focus and do well in your own organization, but accept some responsibility to step out there. And that's where I think this pledge, I think, was very timely. I found myself taking on that challenge and saying to our people, you're right, we need to talk more openly about the challenges. We need to recommit to make more progress, recognize where we're making progress, but also where we're not. And then we need to accept this responsibility to engage outside, not just within our walls, but join forces with other businesses and get involved. And I think that very timely pledge, I think, created one of those opportunities where the voice of business, really important. We've got thousands and thousands of people on our, you know, in our workforces, and they're looking up. They want to be a part of that kind of an organization, and they want to see their organization linking arms with others and speaking out. And so for me, that was the basic background to it, Ron. Very timely, and very pleased that we could be a part of it.
Before we go to Deb to explain, give us a sense, what did you discover in engaging in this pledge that you look back upon a year ago and say, wow, I didn't realize this was going on inside of EY. Was there any one seminal area that you discovered that you said, I had no idea?
Well, you know, I think we've increasingly seen the power of inclusion. I mean, diversity, the facts you've referred to, have been apparent to all of us, but I think the power of inclusion just becomes more and more apparent to me. And I think that particularly over the last couple of years, when we created more forums for people to just talk about the issues that were affecting them outside, the message I got back from some of our blacks, for example, was very powerful in that they want to be part of an organization where they can be themselves. They spend more time at work than they do at home, and so to be more comfortable talking about the issues of today and how they're impacting them was something that they really appreciated. And the power of that means they can be themselves, and that gets back to the power of inclusion, which is we all want to be as good as we can be, and if everybody feels like they can be themselves, bring themselves to work, contribute themselves, then we're going to get those diverse perspectives. So more focus on the power of inclusion.
Good. Very good. Deb, you guys are part of the steering committee, and you guys leaned in early.
And thanks for the privilege of being here today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you all, both on this panel and then the follow-on one, which Steve is actually going to get quite a bit more into the I piece of diversity and inclusion, which is certainly something that we've put a lot of emphasis on in the last few years. Similar to E&Y, I mean, we've been on a journey around advancing women, diversity, and inclusion for literally 25 years. It is a journey. We're very proud, but one of the things we always say is we're proud, but we're not satisfied at all with where we are. We've always had a very strong tone at the top around diversity and inclusion, going back to the beginning with the person who started this for us, Mike Cook, who was really a leader in our profession, and we've had a number of CEOs who followed, including our current CEO, Kathy Engelbert. And so we've always had a very visible tone at the top inside our organization. We get asked, I'm sure like many of you, to sign on to many different commitments and compacts, but this one was important because of the nature of the topic. I think it is different. I think the focus on increasing the importance of those difficult conversations is noteworthy. I know as Kathy and our leadership talked about it, and I know one thing that Kathy pushed hard for, I think along with others, was let's really expand the number of organizations. There's power in numbers, and so I looked at the website last night. I think it's over 350 now who have signed on, over more than 80 industries. That is powerful. So we were proud to be a part of that for sure. And our people are proud when we talk about our commitment to these things. And I think one thing that we've seen, Ron, what have been, maybe answering the question you asked, Steve, what have been some of the things that we have found? I think just in light of the environment that we find ourselves in, it's increasingly important for our CEO's voice to be heard on a number of topics, and particularly inclusion-related matters. And so, Kathy does talk about that, and it's very authentic because it's something that she deeply cares about. And as she shares her own story, she knows how important it was to her success, similar to what Phyllis said, how important mentors and sponsors were to her. We continually evaluate what we're doing, and we continue to evolve our inclusion strategies. And so certainly one of the things that we are putting more emphasis on are, coming out of this commitment and just recognizing the importance of these conversations is thinking about unconscious bias. How do we educate our workplace? I think we are still continuing to evolve that strategy. I think we've concluded it's not just one thing. We have a series of things that we're doing to increase the dialogue around that. It is some very specific training around unconscious bias, but it's also embedding it into all of the training that we do. And we're a learning organization because our greatest asset are people. And so we have learning going on both on the job, but in ongoing leadership and development. So it's in a variety of ways. And, I would just say, and again, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, we're also very focused on trying to be very intentional around saying, what are those behaviors of inclusive leaders? Because it's not just around programs. How people feel is how they experience the organization every day. And that is driven so much by the behaviors of all of our leaders. And so one of our mantras at Deloitte very much now is to be a leader at Deloitte by definition means you are an inclusive leader. That is an expectation of leadership, and here are the behaviors that we expect of those inclusive leaders.
So David and Sid, you guys heard about the CEO action and being who you are. What were your thoughts on? I mean, you've seen a lot of these initiatives in an earlier lifetime. But what were your thoughts when you heard about this CEO action for diversity and inclusion? David, go with you first.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Ron, and thank you, John and JP Morgan for the opportunity to be here. So, no, when I saw Tim kick this off last year, I couldn't be more excited. I mean, this is, I think, the first ever where CEOs actually came together and made a commitment to diversity. And as touched on in earlier panels, the tone starts at the top. and to have 350 CEOs and frankly competitors. You got two of the big four here. Tim Ryan kicked this off, and also KPMG, all coming together to really promote this and work together as groups was very encouraging. But the other key thing that I want to highlight here is I think that a number the CEOs that join the organization, they're public companies, private companies, nonprofits, and whatnot. But the other force that we're seeing out in the marketplace that we haven't touched on yet today is the institutional investor community. And you're starting to see groups like BlackRock, like Vanguard, the City of New York, pushing for greater diversity, in leadership circles, specifically around the boardroom. And the point that I want to get across real quickly was a point that was made by Michelle Edkins, who runs BlackRock's proxy voting team. I like to call her the $6 trillion woman. She oversees over $6 trillion of assets and votes on that. And she actually spoke at one of our conferences earlier this end of last year. And she coined a term which was actually the first time I actually heard it, and I want to give her full credit for this, was around visible diversity. And what I mean by that is, when we look at companies and we look at the CEOs that have joined, the movement here, what do we often do? We'll often look at the website and we'll see, well, who's on their board and who's on their leadership team. And, to be able to, as you talk about the millennials, companies that they want to join, they want to be able to join companies that represent them. And I think that's what you're starting to see, that CEOs are now hearing it from their shareholders, which I couldn't say I'm very excited to be part of.
Mm-hmm. Sid, how about you?
Well, I couldn't be more excited because we know that whatever is a priority for the CEO is a priority for the company. Mm-hmm. And while CEOs have lots of different priorities that they need to address, whether it's from the shareholder side, the business, the people, the employees, the customers. When you see that there is a strong commitment that it's not just supporting diversity and inclusion, but it's elevating it to being a champion of diversity and inclusion. And there's a big difference between saying I support it versus I champion it. Support it means you believe in it. Champion it means you're ready to do something about it. And the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion is the first time that I've seen a large number of CEOs sign, and even though it's, you have those key commitments, whether it's having those difficult discussions about race and multicultural topics, or making sure that there's discussions on unconscious bias, and also agreeing to share those best practices and worst practices of what worked and what didn't work with your competitors, which is unprecedented because in the past that was sort of like a marketing competitive advantage within the companies, and saying now instead of keeping it to ourselves, we're going to share it and then leverage some of our non-for-profit partners, whether it's ELC, I said, Catalyst, LEAP, Asian American Business Development Center, all these different other organizations that can help make sure that when when these topics are being discussed, that we know that from the very top, it is a priority. So for me, I was very excited about it. I came from Wall Street, mm-hmm. and for many years it was a very lonely place, particularly in my area of equity research. Seeing this from the CEO, I think now sends a message throughout all departments. Some that are very well diverse, and some that need a lot of work when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And it's also sending a message out to those companies that have not yet signed, mm-hmm. but are recognizing that it's becoming increasingly important to sign because this is the new normal.
Right. So, Deb, we got this new CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. We have this new Majority Alliance. How do you see the two complementing each other's efforts?
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear about the new Majority Alliance. I know I have more to learn, but it was great to have you frame it in the previous panel for sure. And I think this is about the power of bringing more people together. We talked about the power of having 350 organizations and growing across more than 80 industries sign up for this versus one industry taking the lead. I see this being very similar to that this has the opportunity to create a more collective set of interests and movement. Having worked with you and Sid, along with the other organizations with the Alliance for Board Diversity, I've seen that be very powerful of bringing the collective interests together. I think John made a great point. I think what will be important is to have the Alliance have some very intentional goals and to figure out like what white space, right? Because I think one of the challenges we all find, I live in Chicago, we have a lot, and I know many of you live here in New York and other places, we all have a lot of great organizations that are doing many things, but I think sometimes we overlap or unintentionally there's gaps that aren't being filled by the multitude of organizations. So one thing I know personally I'd like to see is the Alliance figure out what are some of the gaps that exist that the individual organizations aren't covering and having some very intentional actions. And then I would really look at the organizations that have signed on to the CEO commitment as being a starting point to say, how do we come together to drive towards to those collective goals. I think there's huge power in bringing 3 amazing organizations together, and my guess is there may be others, right? This is hopefully just the start. I think there'll be more power similar to the CEO action commitment if more organizations join onto the construct and drive things forward.
Steve, what about you? I mean, you've seen a lot of business transformation taking place out there. This is kind of similar on the same grounds, but we got to get this right. Otherwise, we miss. What are your thoughts about the CEO action and the New Majority Alliance initiatives?
Well, I too, like Deb said, I'm just learning about it in the framework, but I'm excited about it. I think more visibility to the issues and an opportunity for us to be aligned and leveraging the work that's being done. So, just think of the basic visibility of the issue. You're talking about the majority, right? Yet we all know that we're focused on underrepresented minority in business. So if we look at senior levels, I mean, how ironic. I mean, to bring people's attention to that, to say, this is the majority, yet, we are still struggling mightily with how they're represented, and what are we doing about that? And then to leverage the actions on this effort, to keep moving on the CEO pledge and the actions there. You started talking earlier. I think a great example is what are we doing around measurement?
Right.
And I would say as well, I agree Deb's point earlier. As EY's CEO, I think it's very important to have a voice, but it's also important that I'm holding people accountable and making sure that my leaders know that I have certain expectations. I'm asking about that. We have disciplined processes in place. And so I think these efforts can help in sharing practices and what are we doing to advance things and leveraging the efforts on all sides to try and make progress. And we don't have to invent everything within EY. I am happy to listen and learn from great ideas and great progress being made by others in this important area.
Good. David, what about you? I mean, you're a data miner. You collect big data and make sense out of it. How do we leverage the New Majority and the CEO action plan using data and insights?
Absolutely, Ron. No, thank you for teeing this up. I mean, I want to build on your points and Deb's points just a couple minutes ago. As we all know, sunshine is the best antiseptic. And one of the things that we're doing at Equilar is part of what we do is we track data on corporate executives and boards. And we were at a conference about almost 2 years ago, about a year and a half. I was led by Susan Ness, who's a board member at Tegna, a couple other boards, and it was a conference about women on corporate boards. And we made a commitment beginning of 2017 to track every quarter the percentage of women on boards. And Phyllis alluded several statistics earlier, and we were the first ones to actually look at gender diversity across all corporate boards, all public boards. And it's even lower. So as you imagine, it's about 16% across the Russell 3000 are board seats that are occupied by women. And what we've started to do is every quarter is to track that, to really measure how quickly is that changing. And we're going to be rolling out our latest installment in about, I think, either later this week or next week. But when we first started this, to achieve gender parity across boards, it wasn't going to be until 2055. So roughly about 40 years from now for gender parity to be achieved on boards. As part of all this, we found over 600 companies in the Russell 3000, close to 700 companies, did not have any women on their boards. I'm pretty confident, I don't have the stats, the exact stats, but I bet you the number of boards without people of color is probably even higher than that. And so what I would love to be able to commit to is to be able to track not only a gender diversity index every quarter, but an ethnic diversity index. And I think that's really what as Ron, as you pointed out, having a goal to shoot for. Because what the data we aggregated, CalPERS is now using, they've gone out and reached out to 500 companies that don't have women on their boards to say, what are you doing to get more women on your boards? So that's, I think, really what I'd love to be able to see.
Very good. I indicated I wanted to open this up to the audience to ask some questions. Damon, how am I tracking on time? You can start now. Okay. All right. Want to be disciplined. 4 minutes. Good. Okay. 4 minutes. All right. From the floor, who has a burning question about how might this CEO action and the new majority alliance work together? Any questions? Right here. There's a microphone on your table, and if you would stand up and introduce yourself, I want to know who you are.
Hi, Yvette Donato, Educational Testing Service Chief Diversity Officer. So it's, I note that even if we're visible, we're invisible, because even though we're there, we don't have the influence. So it isn't enough to get us in. It's also important that we really have power. Because if the usual folks go off and make the decisions and it's just a discussion that we happen to be present at, that doesn't really change anything. And that's what I witness.
So Steve, you at the very top, and you got all this power, being the CEO. How do you share some of this power that is at the very top? Tell us about that.
I don't disagree, and that's where, when I talked about a few years ago, I was approached by our partner council, which is elected by the partners at EY. I meet with them quarterly, and on this topic, they basically said, it seems like we've made a lot of progress with women, but we're not making enough progress with others. And they wanted to talk about, like you are in the new majority, blacks, Latinos, Asian Americans, and they're focused on representation at all levels, including the top. And you're right. I think that if we don't, and I had to accept that the numbers don't lie, the data, as David said, and so they want to see representatives, role models, people at the tables who are making decisions, our board, leading our top clients and the like. And so that gets into accepting that, looking at that, and then getting into the data, the actions, the measurement. Do we have pipelines? Do we have succession planning? Do we have role models? And so I couldn't agree more.
But I'm hearing also intentionality also being asked. How do we drive intentionality? Deb, I'm going to let you
Yeah, so
take
maybe just adding on to what Steve said. So I'll just share a couple strategies that we've employed at Deloitte. So one thing that our current CEO did that I personally found to be very powerful is when she took on her role as CEO, she made the Chief Inclusion Officer, my role, a direct report to her, and having a seat at our executive leadership table. And I've been a very senior partner at our firm. I sat on our board. It is different when you have a seat at the table and you're not just interacting with our other business CEOs and leaders on topics of inclusion, but on all issues. And that has been extremely powerful. On the intentionality front, I think one thing that we've added on to our process that's been helpful, certainly we've ensured that we have diverse candidates in the process, but if they're not selected for a lead client role or a business leader role, why not? Why weren't they selected? What gaps perhaps do they have in their experiences or skills, and how are we going to make sure they're prepared for the next leadership opportunity? And to have those candid conversations, that's an intentional step that we've added, and it is making a difference. Not just having them in the pool, but why not, and how do we get them there?
How about 2 more questions, and we'll call it a morning, okay? I know you're saying 1. I got the mic. I'm gonna use my power, and I'm gonna ask for 2. All
That's
right.
having the power, Ron.
Here's 1 over here, especially from the white males in the room. Don't leave Steve up here by himself, all right?
Welcome, everyone. Hope this is working. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you. I think this is excellent. My name is Lenny Carroll. I was a former CEO of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce for 15 years. I'm now the Chief Operating Officer for Mercy College. One of the things I think that we lack, and just going back to that, I'm the first Latino to be in a position at a college representing the Hispanic market. I'm born in Puerto Rico. Although I have that light skin, I have my heart there. So it's important. One of the things I think we lack, as we give those promotions to whichever minority it is, whether it's women, Hispanic, or black, we never tell anybody. We just let them get on that board, and it's kept a secret. I think if we let everybody know in the world that we've made that move, whichever company it is, it at least shows that we are making it. They get hired, they get on the board, and never a press release. Neverthing ever told about it. So I think that's the inclusiveness that we should try to do. And I would be honored to be a part of your team to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sid, you wanted to speak to that? Then we got 1 more question, and then we're going to give it back to, we're going to take a break after that, right? Okay, good. 1 question, Sid, and then we're going to have 1 question and the final question from Forrest. Sid.
Well, I'll just be brief because I just to make sure we get the other questions. Is that I think that those are very important, but I want to even build on top of that. Is that because one of the things that we do, what I said, is we have a program called the Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers Program, and what's unique about this program is that it's not just getting into the program because you're qualified, but it's also because you are someone that cares about the community. Because what we want to develop is not only leaders diverse leaders that rise up the corporate ladder, but leaders that when they get to the top of that ladder, that they don't lift that ladder up to make it harder for others to rise up that ladder. We want to be sure that we're getting that we're developing and supporting and being very, as you mentioned, intentional about mentoring and sponsoring leaders so that they can rise up, but as they rise up, that the base of that ladder stays strong so that others can rise up too.
Yes. Forrest, I think you'll be the final question.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Forrest Harper with Inroads. Both Deb and Steve, you guys have amassed a lot of data over the last several years about the impact of diversity. The one area that I do agree with the gentleman who just asked a question from Puerto Rico, from the university rather, how do we convert that into a report to the community? Because the 380-something CEOs signing off on a pledge is one thing inside our walls, but how do we take it to the community? Steve, as you said, that's where race and all those other topics are really, really there. I think the CEO in action can help you, but what are your thoughts on how you take it to the community?
Steve?
I think it's a fair challenge. As I said earlier, we need to be committed to making more progress in our own walls, and we need to be more visible. So I think this is a very fair challenge that, at EY, we're very proud. Diversity Inc. ranked us #1 in the last year. But why aren't we talking more about that? I've been asked. They looked at data to make that decision, and that's a fair challenge. We should be talking to our people and to the community more about what are we doing, why are we making progress, where do we need to make more progress. So I accept the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Deb,
agree, and
then
I
Sid,
think I think there's an intent to at least collectively try to show the progress of the organizations. I know Catalyst has had a CEO action commitment, and they are gathering data to show the progress of the Catalyst companies that are supporting the advancement of women in key leadership roles, board roles, et cetera, as a collective group, sort of versus the the non-committed organizations. But as David said, when you measure something, it gets done. And so I think we all will need to continue to show progress and be accountable for that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and also to answer how it gets back into the community is that because all of our organizations and many of our companies are also tied in terms of our philanthropic strategies back into other community-based nonprofits, whether it's the National Urban League, whether it's Unidos US or LULAC or the Asian American Justice Center or other organizations that are at that grassroots level. This work eventually will resonate and will trickle into the community so that from the top all the way to the front line, that this is an issue that is being addressed. And of course, this is still the beginning. It hasn't even been a full year yet. I know that there'll be another CO Action gathering later this year. And I think that this is going to start building that momentum. But as I mentioned in the previous session, that sometimes this is just that first push. And as we get the momentum going, it's going to build and resonate throughout the community.
Mm-hmm. Good. How about a round of applause for our panelists? And I will turn it back over to our wonderful moderator and co-host, Steve, Sid, Deb, David. Thank you very much.
See, there you saw the perfect example of your question, that in the CEO position, you have the ultimate authority. Despite my trying to get you to break, he's making us late. I hope you heard me. But I'm kidding, kind of kidding, because we do want to make this as useful to you as possible. So those questions are important, but I had to throw that out there. And speaking of making this as important to you as possible, before we take this quick break, I just wanted to remind you that there are going to be volunteers who are going to come around during the break, and they may approach you with a note card with 2 questions that would allow feedback to make this event even better as we speak today and tomorrow. Your feedback will be taken into consideration. And also, if you fill that out, you will be entered into the Blitz Survey Raffle, which is an extra raffle where you will be eligible to win an MGM Resorts International 2-night stay vacation package, and also 2 tickets to Cirque du Soleil. So there's a little motivation for you to fill out that feedback. And all of you, make sure your business card is in the BOLA registration, because you will be entered in the main raffle. And with that, I'm going to let you take a break. It's going to be about 10 minutes. We need to be back. So it's a little bit short because we're running a bit behind, but we'll start at 10:50 sharp. Enjoy. There's coffee, refreshments.